Welcome into episode 254 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. The Bruins fell to the New Jersey Devils 2-1 in overtime on Wednesday night. As we record on Thursday, Bridget and Scott, let's jump right into the opening shifts.
Yeah, so mine a little bit on the negative side. I thought a couple of the Bruins lines last night were pretty good, and we'll get into them. One that was way too quiet was I'll call them the second line, but Brad Marchand, Charlie Coyle, and Trent Frederick. And Bruins got outshot 6-2 when they were on the ice. Marchand had 2 shots on goal for the game, Coyle none, Frederick 1. And this kind of continues something that's been a bit of a trend this season, which is that for whatever reason, Marchand and Coyle together just doesn't seem to click. On the season now, they've played 121 minutes together, which is like getting to be a pretty big sample. Bruins have been outshot 66-50. Expected goals are 44%. Like that's just not very good. Coyle's been much better when it's been Van Riemsdyk with him along with Frederick. Marchand, they kind of feel like they're still trying to find like the best fit, like where he goes without Bergeron, because there were stretches where him with Zacha and Pasternak was pretty good, and then there were stretches where they were very quiet. I think I'm at a point where I would like to see Marchand with Poitras for a little longer of a stretch and see how that looks, because there's been some encouraging signs, but they haven't spent a whole lot of time together. In theory, Marchand and Coyle should work better, like smart players, two-way players. They hold on to pucks, all that, but for some reason it just isn't clicking, and I think Wednesday night was kind of another example of it.
Yeah, and basically I wanted to talk about Morgan Geekie and the game that he had, because I feel like he showed us a lot of different skills that we just haven't seen from him throughout the season, because he hasn't had the same opportunity that he did last night, because he went right from the game before being the fourth line right wing to all of a sudden he's the top line center. And we were wondering how he was going to do in that role. And though at one point in time he was moved off of that role because it was, just the lines were stagnant in general, he ends up scoring with a different group of guys. I think it was Van Riemsdyk was on his line at the time. It was JVR, Geekie, Heinen. And they all had a point in last night's game. Geekie had the goal. Started out on the top line, ended up on the top line by the end of the game. And I don't know if you guys noticed this, but he had a few like very creative plays that he made besides just working really hard. He had that play where he knocked the defender's stick forward, left the puck back, and like just created a little bit of space for himself and took it and went around. And then, he had a few different things that he did that I was like, oh, I didn't realize he was that kind of like playmaker. We hadn't seen that from him yet, but I thought he had a great game and stepped up without Zacha.
Yeah, I liked Geekie's game a lot. I liked his effort, and definitely more to discuss regarding him and his usage. Is he one of those players who performs better with better players around him, and kind of plays, levels off if he's with lesser talent? So I was listening to the morning show on WEI this morning, and Mike Milbury was on, and he brought up something it's an age-old debate, but I kind of found it interesting for him to bring it up on this morning, because it didn't really seem relevant to recent games, recent weeks that he may have been discussing. But he brought up the idea of Boston. He thinks the Bruins should trade Linus Ullmark. And I know that we've talked about it before. It's not a new topic of conversation. But as the season keeps going on here and the Bruins look at what they need on this roster, obviously McAvoy and Zacha being out, that's your top defenseman and your top center. So it's tough to assess the team based on last night's game. But just in general, there's a lot of teams out there in the NHL that could use goaltending. The Bruins have it in spades, as everybody here knows. It's a position of strength. Yes, you would be taking away a position of strength. You would be taking away the ability to go every other game with Swayman and Ullmark and a potential playoff rotation like Scott wants and others want as well, you would be getting rid of that to address needs elsewhere if the potential trade partner was out there, blah, blah, blah. This is a bit of an unprocessed thought by me, but I heard it this morning and I thought it was kind of a, good time to maybe just revisit it and just get a pulse check on the skate pod. And so that's not my opening shift, not to do with the Devils game last night, but just, revisiting this conversation.
Yeah, and I think, even though I'm very much open to the playoff rotation, I'm also not opposed to trading one of the goalies. And I think we all agree, you'd probably prefer to keep Swayman. He's younger. He's more of the long-term future. So I'm not opposed to trading Linus Ullmark. I just think it has to make sense. Like, it has to be for either him traded directly for a real impact player, most likely a forward, or you kind of have like two deals lined up at once where Ullmark's going one place and you're getting assets back that then help you immediately turn around and execute another trade that's already in place. Like, what I wouldn't want is like trade Ullmark now because the right price is out there, and then okay, now we're gonna go shop for a forward. And it's like, all right, well, what if you don't really find a forward? Like, now you've kind of backed yourself into a corner where you've freed up money, you've made this one trade with the idea of doing something else, but that doesn't guarantee that other great trade is out there. So as long as it makes sense, like, I'm okay with it. I just don't know that it's going to make sense. I think it hasn't made sense to this point, because when you look at like teams that are looking to trade for number one goalie, part of the problem is like most likely there are other contenders. So do you really want to trade Linus Ullmark? Like, the Carolina Hurricanes would love to trade for Linus Ullmark. You're not trading him within the conference because then he could potentially end your season. So I know, people mentioned the Edmonton Oilers, certainly a contender if something ended up working out there, but like that's one team. It's like you got to find more of a market than that. So I'm not opposed to it. I just think I'm not trading him just for the sake of trading him. And right now I kind of struggle to see like that perfect trade that makes it worth pulling the trigger on.
Yeah, and if you're just say it's like Edmonton or but just a playoff team in general, they're probably not going to want to trade you, a top six forward. They're probably like, oh no, I think we need all of our top six forwards in order to win a cup or be in the running. So that's the kind of that's just kind of the issue with the logistical part of it. I guess I don't really have an issue with trading Ullmark in general, and I think we had the same opinion last season, but I do think that we've said it on this podcast a million times, goaltending is the biggest strength and might be why the record is what it is, even though the forward group isn't quite as strong. And Brian, this was one of your takes recently that the record is better than the team, and that's because of goaltending. So I'm not sure. I mean, in the playoffs, can you really survive on goaltending alone? The Bruins didn't last year. So it just depends what management values. Do they value having guys that can go one than the other? I know they do in the regular season, but we didn't see that in the playoffs. So if their philosophy in the playoffs is to ride one guy anyway, maybe trade a goalie.
Well, and in theory, you don't want to solely rely on goaltending in the postseason, Bridget, like you just asked. So like, again, part of why Milbury brings this up is he feels that Jeremy Swayman is an elite goaltender in the NHL, and that by trading Ullmark, who's a little bit older, costs a little bit more, and isn't your long-term future, Swayman is, and also one could argue should be already the present solely. By getting rid of Ullmark, you do help bolster that lineup anyway around you, where you still have the elite goaltender in Swayman, but now you've kind of maybe plugged in a hole or two. And as you guys have illustrated, it's harder to do that because you don't want to do it in conference, as Scott mentioned, and contenders don't want to part with a top 6 forward, for example, like Bridget mentioned. So what I would ask is, why are we limiting ourselves to only thinking about contenders? Do you think there are teams out there that maybe they're on the bubble or just beneath it and they're on the rise and they're saying to themselves, we think we're just a goalie away for 24, 25, as opposed to this year?
Possibly. Yeah, because Ullmark does have another year, so it could be a team that's, not quite there this year, but thinks they're heading in the right direction. Just kind of trying to take like a quick look through. I sort of wonder who that might be. Like the Ottawa Senators invested in Eunice Corpusalo, which I think might have been a mistake, but they already did it, and they can't really get out of that 3 months into that commitment. So like there's some teams like that. The Seattle Kraken maybe are a team that was there last year, struggling this year. They might feel like, they can get back quickly if they get the goalie. So like possibly something, I'm just spitballing, but like that could be an option too.
I mean, 3 teams that come to mind, Scott, would be like, you mentioned Edmonton earlier. Obviously they're hoping to contend now, but I mean, Calgary, Minnesota, Anaheim.
Yeah. The problem with Calgary is they have so much already invested in goaltending with the contracts they have from Markstrom and Vladar. And also they're really high on Dustin Wolf, who's gotten like a cup of coffee so far, but is one of the top ranked goalie prospects in the league. So I kind of doubt that they would give up a ton for Ullmark. Anaheim's an interesting one because there's been rumors of them trading John Gibson, who I think is in the final year of his deal. So yeah, that's a team that obviously got off to a good start and has really faded since. But I mean, yeah, sure. Like if they're looking towards next year and they think they're maybe closer than they've shown over the last month, yeah, that can make sense.
Or like, what about like Chicago that's trying to rebuild with Bedard? I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is like, there's always going to be a reason why a team wouldn't want to do it. But if you float Linus Ullmark out there for the league over the next, call it 10 months, I'm sure there would be a deal that would probably entice the Bruins as well.
I have one team that I think maybe. I mean, the Penguins are pretty happy with Tristan Jarry, right? So I don't. For some reason, that was one that popped into my mind. But what about St. Louis? Would they make a move with St. Louis? They're just outside right now in the standings, and
I think they're kind of trapped with Binnington's contract, right?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering because he's not been good this year, but they're a team that's right now they're right on the bubble. They're in the last wild card spot.
Yeah, I mean, Binnington's $6 million for 3 more years after this. Like that's again similar to Ottawa. It's like once you kind of make that big money commitment to a goalie, you're sort of stuck. Like for better or worse, and for some of these teams, definitely for worse. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure St. Louis would love to upgrade over Binnington, who hasn't been very good this year, but they can't. Like you can't have $11 million invested in one position.
So I guess that kind of demonstrates what we're talking about, how even if that's something that the Bruins were open to doing or even were favoring that option, sometimes that there's not a trade partner that's, first of all, in the position to trade for a goalie, cap wise, or because they already have money committed to goalies, or because they, they're within the conference and you're not going to trade with them. All of those reasons, like we just mentioned, are reasons why it hasn't happened in the past. And I feel like it's still pretty unlikely to happen this season.
Yeah, it wouldn't be easy, especially if you're going to pretty much cross off the Eastern Conference, right? I mean, if you're going to take away half the league to start, which I'd have to think about if I even feel that way, because sometimes you just have to do business if it's best for your team. You can't be too afraid that Linus Ullmark is going to be the ghost of Christmas past for you. But it is hard. It's not easy. There's a lot of things at play. What I can say is when teams want to get something done, GMs can get creative. There's sometimes there's multi-team deals and whatnot. But that'll be for Don Sweeney and company to figure out. I just wanted to bring this up because Milbury brought it up, and yeah, obviously the Bruins aren't a perfect team, and when you are so solid in goal, yes, you're taking away from what your strength is. But if you're somebody who thinks that Jeremy Swayman is the guy for now and in the future, and you just need somebody to come in and play maybe 35 games a year as a backup, you can find a solid backup out there. You don't need to have two of the top goalies in the world on your team. You do right now because you're kind of ailing elsewhere, but you don't need that. It's a luxury, not a necessity. So sometimes you have to give to get, is all I'm saying. And
yeah,
I wanted to bring it back up.
And one other thing we have to know in this discussion too is Linus Ullmark has a 16-team no trade list. So we talk about potentially eliminating the Eastern Conference. Linus Ullmark himself can literally eliminate half the league. So that also has to be.
That's very true.
You have to work around that.
Yeah, there's a lot of workarounds. There really are.
But I think we all kind of feel the same way though, Bridget, would you say, where it's like, if it makes sense, we're all open to it. Right?
Yeah, I'd say open to it because of the way that they've used their goalies in the past in the playoffs. They had Swayman right there to go to, and they waited way too long. They're if you're not gonna do the goalie rotation in the playoffs, I understand it works in the regular season, but if we're talking about trying to win a Stanley Cup, if you're not going to use both of them in the playoffs, then yeah, you have to be open to moving a position that you aren't going to lean on one of the guys and maybe get something back that you will actually use, which would be a winger. But I also am completely okay with keeping both of them because they're both good. And I want to see a goalie rotation in the playoffs. Just putting it out there. Scott and I both said this is something we'd like to see last year. Razor disagreed with us. He thought it was blasphemous. I want to see it. I know, we talk about, it hasn't been done, just not what they do. Why not? I want to see it. Okay.
And that's where our panel disagrees probably the most, is that I want to see the goalie rotation out of curiosity, but what I want to see more than that is I want to see Jeremy Swayman be given a postseason to start with. We haven't seen that yet, and it's kind of like we've seen them do. We've seen Tuukka have that opportunity. We've seen Ullmark have that opportunity, and it's almost like I want to see the goalie rotation if we get to see Swayman have that opportunity, and if Swayman had an opportunity to have a playoff series and run with it, and also kind of faltered, then I would be like, okay, yeah, I want to see a rotation now. But it's almost like you guys want to see the rotation before Swayman gets the chance to show what he can do. And that curiosity for me is trumping my rotation curiosity, if that makes any sense.
Well, I have two reasons, selfishly, right? It's I just personally am so curious how it would work out. And I find it really interesting. And, it's something we've debated. And I just, as a hockey fan, want to see, does it work? Do people hate it? Do people like it? Are people like, oh my God, this is what we're going to do now? Is it a new what if it works really well? It's a new strategy. Bruins win the Stanley Cup and everyone's like, now we need to try that. So I don't know, just as a hockey fan in general, I'm just really curious to see how it would work. But that would also mean you would be doing the same thing that you did in the regular season, which is just pure alternating 50-50, which I know in the playoffs, you usually stick with the guy that if he has a great game the night before, you don't take him out. It's definitely kind of ingrained in hockey culture that that's just how you do it. So it would feel unnatural, but I just want to see it one time. I want to see what it looks like. And this is the perfect goalie combination to try it, I think.
Yeah, my real take on this is I want you to do whatever's working in the regular season. Whatever you're doing leading up to the playoffs, if it's working well, just stick with it. And last year, the rotation was working historically well. And that's why I wanted them to stick with it. They went away from it. It didn't work. If it's working really well this year, come the end of the regular season, once again, my take will be that I want to see it continue into the playoffs. If, say, in like the final month and a half of the regular season, Swayman is clearly outperforming Ullmark, then what I would want to see is I would want to see them lean on Swayman more down the stretch and prepare him to be the number one for the playoffs. Like I'm not on. It has to be a rotation, and I'm stuck on that, and I'm not going to change. No, what I'm going to be stuck on is whatever is working best for you down the stretch leading up to the playoffs. I just want to see that continue.
Yeah, which for this season and last season was a rotation. So, and did you guys see the split Swayman did last night?
Yeah.
That was insane. That was, and even Ullmark, when he came to the bench after that, he said something to him like, he said, "That's a split and a half." It's like, yeah, that looked painful.
Yeah, by the way, we heard that because Ullmark was mic'd up, and I gotta say, like, I'm not sure there's too much that's more pointless than hockey players being mic'd up. Like, it has been
heads up, heads up, heads up, heads up.
I can't even remember the last time we got anything interesting from a mic'd up hockey player. Yeah.
Well, Marchand was mic'd up at one point for a TNT broadcast, and he swore live because they were doing like an interview where he was talking directly to the panel, and he was like skating around during warmups, and he just straight up swore on live TV, and they thought it was funny, but they also were like, great. That was really it, though, that I can remember. That was entertaining.
Yeah, it's a whole lot of let's go, boys. And good play.
Yeah. In, deep. Hold on.
Well, yeah, remember, I think, Scott, you recalled a funny one where Taylor Hall last year was talking to Trent Frederick, and Frederick said it was like his most beautiful goal, and Hall goes, really? Just like, really? That was your best one? Okay.
So Bridget, let's circle back on your opening shift last, because I think it ties into some of the ups. So Scott, we'll jump back to yours, and that's Marchand and Coyle.
Yeah, like I kind of mentioned, like it feels like it should work, and it might at some point. You know, we've seen plenty of instances of guys who don't have chemistry, things aren't really clicking, and eventually they get it. So I'm not saying like never put Marchand and Coyle together the rest of the season. I think you can keep trying. Like, as long as you're winning, and as long as other lines are producing, you can keep trying it. You can go back to it. We know Montgomery's going to change lines every period and a half, anyways. But yeah, for right now, though, it really is kind of odd, like how little that combination has worked, because it's like you would think playing with Marchand would be better for you than having Van Riemsdyk on your left, and that's no knock on Van Riemsdyk, who's obviously having a really good season. But Marchand's a better player. You would think that should work better, and yet it's just not. Like, sometimes chemistry is just a funny thing. Sometimes you kind of either just have it or you don't. And right now, I just don't think Marchand and Coyle had. Like, Marchand was on fire, and then you put him with Coyle, and like he has a very quiet game. And it's, Coyle we've seen playing well. His line scored a goal in Saturday's game when I think he was with Van Riemsdyk and Frederick. And then you put Marchand in there, and it's like the line just doesn't work as well. So, I would put JVR back on that line and give Marchand, Poitras, Heinen, or if Zacha's back and you wanted to do like Marchand, Poitras, Geekie, I do want to see a longer look of Marchand and Poitras together.
Can I? This kind of goes a little bit against what you said, but can I throw some lines out there?
Sure.
So DeBrusk, Poitras, Pasta. Back to the normal line of JVR, Coyle, Frederick, Marchand, Geekie, Heinen, and then the normal fourth line. Do we think Marchand, Geekie, Heinen could be a line? Because Geekie had a good game. He can make plays. Heinen's been working really hard. Do we think that could potentially be something? Because Montgomery did go to DeBrusk, Poitras, Pasta in the second period at one point, which could have some success. I don't know what you guys think of those.
Well, I think so. And we'll get to Geeky, and I loved his game last night, and I loved his work ethic. I feel like Marchand needs somebody who thinks the game offensively at his level. And I don't think that's necessarily Geeky, and I don't think it's Coyle, and I think it can be Zaka.
I'm not gonna lie though, I saw Geeky making some plays, like intelligent, creative plays that I just did not think he could, or just we didn't know that about him. And all of a sudden, I'm noticing he made that like a no look backhand pass exactly to the right spot, and he was trying things that a lot of people wouldn't. I don't know, like wouldn't know to do, or like it kind of felt like he was playing chess a little bit, like, oh, I'm gonna outsmart someone at different points. So I think maybe we just don't know that about him. He could be that kind of player.
Well, are you talking for a long? Are you talking long term or short term?
I'm just talking about try it while Zaka's out.
Okay, then if that's the case, then sure. You know what I mean? Like I said last episode, like when you're down bodies, like whatever it takes to kind of make do and see what you have, right? Okay, so if you're talking while Zaka's out, then sure. I could see a world where I could see that go for a couple of games. Scott, I'll let you chime in there as well.
Yeah, I think I would probably just keep DeBrusk, Geeky, Pasternak together. Like that worked really well, and I kind of just wouldn't mess with that. I was looking at like how Marchand has been with sort of each of the top three centers. Not so much Geeky because I don't know if Geeky's really centered a line with Marchand yet. Maybe in spurts here and there, but like so I went over Marchand and Coyle not really clicking. Marchand with Zaka wasn't really great either. Zaka's actually been better away from Marchand with someone else on his left. Marchand and Poitras is an interesting one. Like just looking at some of the numbers, it's only been 50 minutes, but like Bruins are out shooting opponents 31-23. Expected goals 61%, which is really good. The only thing that's off is actual goals. The Bruins are getting outscored 3-1. So I do think that's maybe part of the reason why Montgomery has been hesitant to go to it, is they've kind of had a habit of giving up some goals once they've gotten together. But the underlying numbers are encouraging. And so I look at that and I'm like, I don't know. It just seems worth taking a longer look. Like it's really only been like, the one game against San Jose where they had a whole game together and they were good. And then Montgomery went away from it for matchup reasons, but he's stayed away from it. So I would, like I said, like that's what I would want to try, just to see if there's something there and something that can stick maybe a little longer term.
Wasn't that the post-game press conference too that we were at, Scott, that he highly complimented that line?
Yeah.
He said that was a good line, and he said like the Zaka line that they had from that day was like good in spurts. But he was very complimentary of that line, more so than we've seen him be in post-game press conferences, because we know he likes to tinker. When someone asked him about it and he gave that answer, it kind of sounded like he was ready to settle on that just at least for a longer trial, but then it didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, when Zaka comes back, I definitely am on the same page as Scott. I want to see Poitras go with Marchand when Zaka's back, and just on Marchand in general, it's very evident to me that and look, this is not a surprise at all. Expected this, would be surprised if this wasn't the case. But in losing Patrice Bergeron, you have, to start the season at least, you've lost a little bit of Brad Marchand. I know he's still producing. He's got like 25 points in 27 games, and that's obviously good for second on the team. And you're not going to hear me sit here and put him down for, not being, over a point per game guy, like, and just being south of it. It's not a big deal. But just watching him at even strength, shift in and shift out, you can just tell that. I mean, they when I said it earlier, like you kind of want somebody who thinks the game on Marchand's level. Like, I mean, Bergeron and Marchand were so in sync for over a decade that it just seems to me he's a little bit lost out there without his running mate, and that's something that obviously he's going to have to get over and and work his way out of. I guess the million-dollar question is, do the Bruins currently have a center that can run with Marchand? Not even necessarily to the level that Bergeron did, but clearly it's not Coyle. Zacha remains to be seen, and Poitras young. So if it's not one of those three guys, can the Bruins afford, if the Bruins are all in this year, right, which management always wants them to be, can you afford to not have somebody playing alongside Brad Marchand that gets the best out of Brad Marchand? And I just think in the first quarter of the season, it's obvious that he's a little stuck in the mud trying to find chemistry with other people, and not his best man there. So I don't know if you guys have obviously picked up on that as well, and what you think. Do the Bruins have the solution internally? Maybe with Poitras or Zacha. I don't know. It's been such a small sample size, but so far it hasn't been obvious for one of them.
Yeah, and that's where I think like it's worth. I guess maybe two things could be worth it. Like one, as I mentioned with Poitras, seeing if that can turn into something, or you put him with Zacha and Pastrnak, and even though that line's been inconsistent at times, you hope that they're three smart, talented players that can figure it out. Because look, obviously we know Marchand and Pastrnak had incredible chemistry for years. They've been on different lines for, really the last two seasons before this one. And when they've been together this year, we haven't really seen that chemistry come back naturally. It hasn't, obviously with a different center, that makes, that's a big difference. So I would also be okay with that, like giving them more time and just seeing if they can work through it and figure it out, because they're three players that are good enough that you would think they should be able to. But yeah, so I guess to bring it back to my take, like the one thing I do feel kind of strongly about right now is like Marchand and Coyle isn't working, and I'd just rather see Marchand somewhere else.
Okay. Do you want to get to our normal Friday segment of who's up, who's down? Because this ties right back into my opening shift. If you don't mind, I will start it out. So we all agreed that Morgan Geekie was a big time up this week. For a lot of the things we kind of already went over just in the course of talking about the game. He stepped up as a top line center. And we've talked about it in the past. He was maybe brought in for a third or fourth line center role. Probably didn't see himself playing on a top line with Pastrnak at any point, but here he is. He did it, and he proved that he could with both his hustle, and he's a big guy too. Like, he's strong. You're not bumping him off the puck easy. So he brings that element too. So he did have a skill set that worked on that top line in terms of possession. He's great at either maintaining possession or getting back possession if the Bruins don't have the puck. So I thought that he was an up. And I just want to hear, you don't have to go long on it, but what do you guys think?
Well, I think that, yeah, you mentioned it, Bridget. He's a big body, and he doesn't get knocked off the puck. And it's not simply because he's a big body. It's because he also has the grit and the effort to go along with it. There's plenty of big guys out there that, people will label soft and, aren't strong on the puck. He is, and he battles. And I think one of the good things about Morgan Geekie, and he's growing on me with each and every game. But what I like about him is that he knows that he has things to work on. He's not a perfect player, and he knows where he has to improve. And I think in the offseason, he made a comment about how he thinks his skating is an area where he needs to improve, his quickness. And while he's still not the quickest guy out there, I just think that, okay, he's probably saying to himself, I might not be the fastest guy in the world or the quickest guy in the world. So where do I need to be? Do I need to excel to compensate for that? And I think it's his puck protection and his work ethic. And, last night's goal is just like, he's not letting anybody take that puck away from him. It's a 50-50 battle. He's taking it. He gets inside ice. He gets to the crease. He gets to the areas where you have to score goals, and he scores a goal. And coming into Boston, I think there was some, I forget now because it's been like 4 months, but there was some underlying analytics that said like he was basically like among the top players in the league, and maybe it was like points per 60 or something like that, or where like when he's given opportunity, he creates. But in Seattle, he was playing a lot on the fourth line. But where he gets opportunity up in the lineup, maybe he kind of just plays up to his competition a little bit. And if that's the case, maybe the same thing's true in Boston, where if he's on the fourth line with Jacob Lauko and Oscar Steen or Johnny Beecher, maybe he's not going to produce as much as if he's playing up in the lineup with David Pastrnak. Most obvious statement in the world, I know, but somebody we'll get to pretty soon hasn't been doing that, so maybe not so obvious. But I guess the moral of the story is maybe not every player would take advantage of that opportunity, and so far he has, and I really enjoyed his game because you can tell he's working hard, and that's very important.
Yeah, and the role he was playing in Seattle was interesting too, because it wasn't just a fourth line role and fourth line minutes. It was also, they used their fourth line in like more offensive situations, which is, the opposite of what the Bruins do, where it's a lot of like D zone starts, and you have to be able to play defense if you're going to be on the Bruins' fourth line. And I think Geekie's defensive work has been pretty strong this year too. Like, they've demanded more from him, especially when he plays center. We know the Bruins system is demanding defensively of centers, and I think he's held up his end of the bargain there too. And yeah, I'm sure it's going to feel great for him to move up and play with Pastrnak, obviously, but B, to put up a couple points in the last 2 games and a goal on Wednesday, because the points haven't really been there for him. That's his 3rd goal of the season, and again, part of that is like he was low in the lineup. He missed a little bit of time with injury, and when he came back, basically like Danton Heinen was the one who passed him on the depth chart, and that's why Geekie comes back and he's a fourth line winger. So yeah, I don't know where he settles in long term. I'm still not sure if we've found like exactly the best fit for him in this lineup, but it's good for him to move up, to show that he can do it, to see the puck go in, and it's good for the Bruins to know that he can do that. That was part of it's part of the reason why like I was on board with putting him there for a game with Zacha out, because you want to know what he does with that opportunity. And I don't think anyone expects him to be their number 1 center going forward, but can he do it in a pinch? And they're learning that, yeah, he can.
All right. So, Bridget, any final takeaways on Geekie before we knock off a couple of other players that we think are ups right now?
No, I think we covered it pretty well.
Okay. Ian Mitchell. Scott, you high on Ian Mitchell right now?
Yeah, I think he's played well. Stepping up with McAvoy out, he's taken on a top 4 role, not just on the depth chart in terms of how the pairings are listed, but in terms of minutes. He's been getting 18, 19 minutes a game the last couple, averaging 19 minutes a game over the last 2 games. So, and I think he's played well. He was on the ice for 4 of the Bruins goals on Saturday. Thought he had another pretty good game on Wednesday. Again, another guy where it's like, do I expect Ian Mitchell to stick in the top 4 going forward? No, definitely not. But you're learning that he can do it in a pinch. And he's had a lot of time next to first Hampus Lindholm, and then last night more so Matt Grzelcyk. And I just think he's playing well. I think he's moving the puck quickly. I think he's been involved in transition. Maybe not like as involved in the offensive zone as we saw in the preseason. I remember a couple of preseason games where it was just like he was just firing away from all over the place. I think we've seen him a little more restrained, playing under control, but that's not a bad thing. Like, you don't. Yes, the Bruins need more offense from the defenseman, but you don't need Ian Mitchell, taking crazy chances up ice. Like, if he just plays responsibly, you'll take that. And I think he's done that these last couple games.
You know, we haven't gotten to downs yet, but I don't think we've mentioned this thus far in the episode, but Jacob Zabora was waived, which is, I think, news since we last recorded. So, and I think he's probably a down, but though it sounds like he requested it and the Bruins adhered to it. So, but I bring him up because Ian Mitchell clearly surpassed him to start the year in the depth chart. Yeah, I like Ian Mitchell. Bit of a riverboat gambler, kind of like reminds me of Connor Clifton at times, where he's, he kind of takes some risks. But like, I like his effort, I like his compete, and for a depth defenseman, there's only so much you can really pick apart at his game. Bridget, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I thought he had another good game since he's gotten. I mentioned him as the second call up because Lori was the first, and it kind of seems like he's really fighting to be that number one guy there. So when when Forbert comes back or McAvoy comes back, he wants to be the one that sticks around. And I think he's making a good case for himself offensively. Yes, and then I know you guys have opinions about how Grzelcyk played, but he, like Scott mentioned, he was with Grzelcyk last game. Potentially could be a really good offensive pair if Grzelcyk is playing, the way that we've seen him in the past.
Yeah, definitely a lot to talk about with Grzelcyk as well. I think we have one final up, and that is Matt Poitras. Obviously, he has been the focal point of discussions in the last week plus with, kind of beginning with Montgomery's scratching of him. And then obviously, the benching in the third period against Arizona. He didn't see much ice time in the third period against Toronto, blah, blah, blah. So, it's been kind of a circus the last week around him. And I'm sure he's been hearing it and being asked about it. But I think that in New Jersey, while he didn't really produce on the score sheet, I think he bounced back pretty well. And I know we all here feel the same way.
Yeah, he was making some good things happen. And I think that whole line with Van Riemsdyk and Heinen had a pretty strong game. Poitras helped create some chances. We saw him, holding onto the puck more in the O zone, making plays, and more importantly, like not making mistakes defensively, like having sort of more awareness when he had the puck and a stick in the D zone, making sure he moves it quickly, not risking turnovers. I was obviously, they go to the third period leading 1-0, and I think we all probably think like, okay, let's see how much Poitras plays. And one of his first shifts of the third period, the Bruins get scored on. The Devils tie up the game. Now, not Poitras' fault at all. It was kind of a wacky goal, honestly, where you get a shot tipped in front, it goes over the net, kind of ends up getting kicked back to the front. Holla hits the post, and then Dawson Mercer just knocks it in out of midair. Like, not sure there's really much Poitras or honestly anyone else could have done on that one. Sometimes the other team just gets a couple lucky bounces.
Well, they had an unlucky bounce first off the crossbar.
Yeah. And then, then it's a tie game, and, good on Montgomery for like not benching Poitras or anything like that. Like, obviously at that point, you need him out there to help you to try to win the game. And I thought that line had at least one really good shift after that I remember, where Heinen had a couple chances, and then Van Riemsdyk had a chance, and potentially could have won the game in regulation.
Yeah, I marked that as with 7 minutes left. That line went out there, and I think Poitras he swung and missed on the first shot, but he was low slot. He took like the puck bounced off one of the defensemen right to him, whiffed on the first one, got the second one off. I think that was his only shot on goal technically of the game. But the puck was right there, and those guys won a lot of battles on that shift. So I remember that shift too, that looked like that could have been the go-ahead goal. With that, it was close to the net. So yeah, I noticed that. In overtime, though, the whole team looked bad in overtime. I'll just put it like that. Yeah, I thought that maybe Poitras didn't have the best overtime, but nobody did. That was a really ugly overtime if you're watching the Bruins.
Yeah, I'll put as a connected thought, Bruins overtime play in general as a down. Like, so clearly in overtime in 3-on-3, possession is the name of the game. And the Bruins win the opening faceoff. Johnny Beach is out there to take it, which usually it's Pavel Zacha, but he's out. So Beecher takes and wins the opening draw, then immediately gets off the ice. And Pastrnak and Marchand both had plays where they like skated into traffic and were just like way over aggressive for what you need to be in 3-on-3. Where it's like, God, like you don't have to try to take guys 1-on-1 in 3-on-3 overtime. Like circle back and set something up. And both times it was like the Bruins had possession for less than 15 seconds and then gave it back and ended up not even getting a shot on goal in overtime. New Jersey had 6 in overtime and scores in the 6th one.
Yeah, and those were 2 zone entries that they were trying to beat guys 1-on-1. And then we talked about how come they've had to defend so much on the rush. It's because they turn pucks over at the offensive blue line, and then you watch both of them walk right into just strong defensive plays and not be able to beat those guys. And it felt like that was the tone set from the very first shift, and everything just was hectic after that. I know Poitras ended up in the net underneath Swayman at one point. And I don't know if you saw it, but Swayman, when they got the whistle, thought it was funny. He was laughing, but it was just kind of, I guess that kind of just visually shows how chaotic it was out there for the Bruins in overtime, where the bodies were flying. Nobody was really where they should have been. It was not pretty.
Well, it was so all over the place that Hampus Lindholm almost ended up in the stands when Jesper Bratt pulled up on him. I mean, put him in a blender. It's like, hey, Hampus, relax, buddy. You're a player, not a fan. Stay on the ice. But yeah, I mean, unless the Bruins are playing Toronto, who just refuses to back check on 3-on-3, hasn't been the greatest area for this team this year so far.
Yeah, and I know like that play ends up looking really bad for Lindholm because of how far off he ends up. I guess my only point would be like Jesper Bratt is extremely good and is coming at him full speed. And it's still, even with Lindholm not being able to keep the gap up, you still escape trouble if either one of Marchand or Pastrnak picks up Jack Hughes. Like Jack Hughes just finds a soft spot right between those two. And it's like, they're both in the neighborhood and neither one even gets a stick within like 2 feet of them.
Yeah. My note on that was it looked like Marchand probably could have closed on him. And yeah.
I mean, it definitely looked like Lindholm got a late read on Bratt's zone entry. Lindholm seemed like he was flat-footed too long there, but regardless, that was one of those plays where he could have perfect gap control, play him tight. Anytime a forward pulls up like that, they're going to gain separation, immediate separation, right? That's a play that I think to be fair to Lindholm, and I think this is kind of what you're saying, Scott, that's going to happen regardless, no matter how he plays that play. That was on the other coverage elsewhere on the ice. I think that play broke down. Okay, so downs. All right, let's start with Grzelcyk because I think there's the other one's probably going to take a little bit more time. Scott, why don't you take the lead here?
Yeah, just think Matt Grzelcyk continues to not really play up to the level that we've seen him play at before. And sure, not having McAvoy the last 2 games doesn't help. That's obviously his usual partner. It's in Jim Montgomery's been asked a couple of times. I know I asked him, and then I think a couple of days later, someone else asked him, just like, what have you thought of Grzelcyk's play since he came back from injury? And people remember like he was on IR and came back for the Rangers game down in New York that Saturday right after Thanksgiving. And I feel like he hasn't played all that well since returning. Montgomery keeps saying like he getting better each game. At least publicly, Montgomery seems happy with his play. He highlighted, Grzelcyk's ability to quickly transition from defense to offense and vice versa. He doesn't get caught in between like some other players do. And that's fine. I see someone who's spent too much time in his own zone who hasn't ended plays as quickly as we usually see. Usually that's a real strength of his, is like his footwork and stick work so good that he forces turnovers and gets going the other way. And then offensively, I don't think he's really been all that involved. And with Grizz, like his offensive involvement doesn't just have to be points, because he's never put up a lot of points, but it's activating the offensive zone, being part of being part of a good cycle, making good passes. And that's not just a him problem, because that takes all 5 guys on the ice contributing to get that cycle going. But I also think like when he's had a chance to be involved offensively, he just hasn't been as much as we've seen in the past.
Yeah, and I don't have it. It's funny because we went over this before we started, and some of these we disagree on. This one I do agree with you, Scott, but I don't have as many criticisms of him. I think he's been quiet, but I don't think he's been bad. I think we know what he can do. We know that he can get involved more in offense, and he hasn't. But I also wouldn't say like he's been terrible since he came back from injury. He's just not 100% looking like himself offensively. So I know Brian's making a face at me right now.
Oh no, sorry. It's not at you. I was reading something.
But I think that this next one is the one that's more contentious. Because we disagree.
First, sorry, Bridget. Just one last thing in Grzelcyk, because I just happened to look this up. He's one of only 2 Bruins defensemen who's a minus at 5-on-5 this year. And the other is Mason Lohrei, who's a -6, but Grzelcyk's a -2. And even like expected goals, he's under 50%. And usually Grzelcyk is like an analytics darling. So
right.
Yeah, that's true.
To kind of further highlight what I'm
that Grzelcyk Carlo pair used to have incredible analytics when they were together. Is that 2 years ago or last year? I remember you always bringing up how good they were with the advanced stats.
Well, Grzelcyk McAvoy even more so. I mean, that they were like usually one of the best.
Bridget, the face I was making was like I was just looking at it. I didn't realize I knew it was low. He's got 1 point in 17 games. Grzelcyk.
Yeah.
I mean, I know he's a defenseman, but I mean, sometimes look, I know there's a lot of analytics that go into player performances and not just the main stat line. I get it. Sometimes the main stat line does kind of tell you a lot what you need to know. 1 point in 17 games -1. I mean, I don't know. Bridget, you can definitely
sorry, but yeah, before we get to our final subject here. While we were recording, Jacob Zaboral cleared waivers, so no one claimed him.
Poor kid.
So,
man.
Unfortunately for him, he's going to remain stuck in Providence.
I feel like he's Donkey in Shrek. I'm all alone with no one to claim me. All right. Anyway, yeah, that sucks. Imagine like being like, "Yo, can you guys waive me? Because like I kind of want a chance somewhere else." And the Bruins being like, "Sure," because no one's gonna take you. And then no one takes you. It's like, oof.
Yeah.
My God.
Yeah, no, that one hurts. That one hurts if you're him.
How's that 2015 draft looking? I mean, I'm not one of those people to really harp on it because like so much time has passed.
Yes, you are.
No,
Speaking
of, it's been a while since I brought up Zach. Yeah, back when people were trying to make Zach Senyshyn happen and he sucked. It's like, stop trying to convince me Zach Senyshyn is going to be anything, or Zaboral, like, whatever. But yeah, speaking of, Scott.
Stop trying to make fetch happen, okay?
Speaking of
that draft, though, our next person on the up or down list is Jake DeBrusk. And Brian and Scott have polar opposite views on how he's played the last few games. I'm kind of in the middle. So let's go to Brian with the down first.
Okay, well, I just want to clarify 2 things real quick. Number 1, you guys will at least back me when I say I typically only harp on somebody if I think that there's a lot more there, because they're capable of more. And also, this is more of a macro perspective on him, not necessarily the last couple of games. So what I'll say about DeBrusk is this, and I know it's been talked about before, so I'm going to keep it brief and let Scott do his thing. But Jake DeBrusk, oh, where'd Jake go? Where is he? All right, so, oh boy, 26 games, 4 goals in 26 games, 7 assists, 11 points, +6. Okay. On the year, DeBrusk has 58 shots, which is a 6.9. Go ahead, Scott. You can say nice. Shooting percentage. So he has the third most shots on the team. Okay, that's what I'm trying to illustrate. He has the third most shots on the team, and he just has a really bad shooting percentage. So one can make the argument against me, like he's got third most shots on the team. He's got bad luck. He is creating. It's bound to happen at some point. And I'm here to say, like, fine. I'm not going to argue that anymore. I'm not going to argue, like, he's making things happen. You know, the chances are there. Like, whatever, fine. What I can tell you is that he's, like, you watch somebody last night like Morgan Geekie, and it jumps off the page. Every shift, he's giving it his all. And there have been shifts this year where DeBrusk is getting his nose in there. It's not enough. And have you guys ever heard the band The Record Company? No?
I've heard of them. I couldn't.
They have a song called Make It Happen. And that's the point I'm at with DeBrusk. Like, I don't care what anybody tells me anymore. I don't care. And so I'm not trying to do a mic drop on Scott before he goes. Like, I'm at the point now where it's like, just make it happen. Like, start scoring, because that's what you're being paid to do, and that's what your team needs of you. And people can tell me till they're blue in the face, Brian, look at this, and this. It would tell you, it would suggest to you it's going to happen. What my response is I don't care. Make it happen. Because until then, what do you want me to do with this? Like, everybody has a job to do. Scott, if you're paid to run digital and at EEI and do a lot more overseeing, and you write articles, and it's like, you know, if it'd be one thing if I watched DeBrusk and said, man, this kid's he's busting his balls. Sorry, Bridget. He's busting his ass every time he's out there. He's just snake bitten. But Scott, that'd be one thing. But Scott, you can't honestly tell me that's the case. It's just not. It's here and there. It's not a lot. And he just has to make it happen. And until then, he's just going to be underwhelming to me.
All right, Brian, look at this. Look, obviously DeBrusk has more to give. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you he's been awesome and no one should worry about anything. Like, yes, his shooting percentage is very low, and part of that is bad luck, and I think it will come up naturally. He also does need to shoot more. Last year, he was just under 3 shots on goal per game. This year, he's just over 2. So basically taking 1 fewer shot per game on goal. His number of attempts are like more in line, but he's had some miss the net, more blocked. Part of that is he's, until Wednesday night, still not on the first power play unit. Obviously, just by the nature of being on a top power play unit, you're going to get more chances, and he did last year. And was basically playing half as much power play time this year. So that's a factor too. Why I'm just not worried about DeBrusk really is I just still think he's making more good things happen than bad. And I thought he played pretty well Wednesday night. He set up 2 golden opportunities for Pastrnak. If one of those goes in, where we're talking about the Bruins winning 2-1 and DeBrusk setting up one of the goals. Instead, Pastrnak, who's a great finisher, didn't bury either of those chances. I'll keep them, like, I can do this with fancy stats or just normal stats. But
Brian specifically told you to not do that. He said, don't say this, and this.
Guess what? Brian's not my dad, and he can't control me.
Oh, Scott. No, Scott can read them all off, because honestly, this is not just for he and I to discuss. This is for the listeners and everything. my response is going to be do it, not almost, but it's not just for me. So
okay, so expected goals for percentage at 5-on-5, and I've used this stat before, but for people who don't know, this is basically percentage of scoring chances when you're on the ice. Like, what percentage of goals would your team be expected to score based on the chances that you're getting and giving up? Jake DeBrusk is at 56.1% this year. The only Bruin better than him is James Van Riemsdyk. Actual goals, the non-fancy stat, just actual pucks in the net at both ends of the ice. DeBrusk at 5-on-5 has been on the ice for 16 Bruins goals, 7 opponent goals, +9. Best mark among forwards. Only Brendan Carlo and Hampus Lindholm are better on the whole team. So they are pretty decisively outscoring opponents when he's on the ice and getting more scoring chances than they're giving up when he's on the ice. And I think his play is part of that. I don't think he's just a passenger who happens to be stuck with really good players. I think his defensive game has come a long way in a couple of years. Obviously, playing on line with Bergeron and Marchand helped with that, but I think he's taken those habits, even being away from them now. And I think he has helped create chances. He has not finished enough himself, not at all. He does have to score more because he's getting paid to do that, and the Bruins need him to do that. But I've said it before. I would be a lot more concerned about DeBrusk if other good things weren't happening when he's on the ice. As long as those other good things are happening, I'm not super concerned, and I think he will start putting up points at some point. I think he's looked good on the line with Pastrnak. I think they've played off each other pretty well, whether it's been Zacha or Geekie in the middle. So I would give that a little longer look and hope that playing with Pastrnak gets him going more on the score sheet.
That was like watching Scott open up gifts like a kid on Christmas. Getting to use his advanced analytics to prove his point is like that. Yeah, I was smiling because I was like, "This is Scott's in his glory right now."
Oh well, I mean, DeBrusk's agent must be so excited for contract negotiations this year with teams. Well, oh, you guys should see his expected goals per when he's out there, and that's going to go a long way to get him a contract next year with somebody.
Can I just quickly give mine because I'm not as like one way or the other. Mine, because Brian gave his in the form of a song title, I'm gonna do that too. So I'm gonna go with The Weeknd. I Feel It Coming. Because I feel like the goals are coming. So so that's where I am. I think Scott's stats, as you just heard, kind of bear that out. I don't think he's been not trying, you know what I mean? Like, he's been trying. I've seen him working hard on the shifts. At least that's what my eyes are telling me when he's out there. He's not being lazy. Maybe he's not working the same as a Geekie or a Heinen. He's probably a little bit more comfortable. And those guys are on the outside, and so those guys need to play like that. I'm not saying he doesn't, but there's a reason why there's a little bit more fire, and also that's more Geekie's game. That's more Heinen's game than it is DeBrusk's game. So I feel it coming. I think that it's it's right there, and for his sake, he really does need to just put some more points up, put some more goals up, so that people who don't go through the advanced analytics like Scott just did can stop freaking out about it. So I guess I fall a little bit more on Scott's side than Brian's side. But
well, I mean, I also feel like it's probably due to happen soon too, which is kind of why I want to have this conversation now before it's a moot point. But yeah, I mean, but here's the thing: like, for me, he's not in a position to be comfortable. Like, he should be pushing the needle and like pushing the pace, because not just because he's a professional, but because, like, if you're in a slump, and this has been a season-long slump, make no mistake about it. So, I mean, like, I just think there's a nose for the net that I just haven't seen. Bridget, sorry about that glare. there's a nose for the net that I haven't really seen much out of him.
Bridget's got a nose for sunlight.
I'm curious.
I'm literally like, if I lean forward, you can't even see my face. I'm just blinded, so I'm gonna just lean back.
I'm curious. Look, maybe he's not the player I thought he was. Maybe my expectations for him are too high. I thought when he was younger, he was somebody who went hard to the net, had good hands, and had a good work ethic. I mean, when he was a rookie, in his sophomore season, like, I never really complained about his work ethic. Ever, actually. It wasn't until the COVID stuff with the bubble where people started to notice he went in these long slumps, and then the Bruce Cassidy stuff happened, and since then, and then he requested the trade. So the first couple of years, I love the player, and believe me, like, I know it sounds like I'm shitting on him. I want him to succeed. I want him to play well. Like, I actually think he seems like a good person and a funny personality. Like, I want him to do well, but it just seems like outside of the stretch with Marchand and Bergeron, it's just been not living up to his expectations as a point producer. And I'm curious, Scott, are there any? Well, first of all, two questions. Do you find that he's using his speed and challenging inside ice as much as he should? And then my second question is, are there any stats about 50-50 battle percentages? Probably not. That's probably way too tough to figure out. But I feel like his 50-50 battles, he's coming up short on most of them. And maybe I'm just being unfair, but that's what it seems like when I watch him.
Yeah, we know that the Bruins track it internally, but there's not any public data on 50-50 battles. I'm gonna take a guess that DeBrusk might not be grading out great, because we know Montgomery places a lot of stock in that. And when Montgomery is asked about DeBrusk, he'll say, like, yeah, he's doing a lot of things that help us win, but some of his details and habits are slipping because he's not scoring. And that's kind of what happens with all scorers when they're not scoring. And, to me, like, that could be one of the things he's talking about, is like, maybe he's not winning as many battles or whatever. I will say, like, for the sake of fairness, because you can often make, you can sort of pick and choose advanced stats, I'll highlight two that, like, clearly have to be better, that are clearly off when I just look at it. Last year, so this is just 5-on-5, so this is taking the power play situation out of it. Last year, he had 10.1 shots on goal per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. This year, 8.2. So that's a pretty significant drop off. Basically, 2 full shots per 60 minutes. Another one, high danger chances. Individual high danger chances. Last year, he had 5.94 per 60 minutes. This year, 4.56. Again, like, that's a pretty sizable drop. And I think, Brian, you asked about, like, getting to inside ice, and I think that's a pretty clear indication that, like, he's not there as much. One, he's not shooting as much in general. Two, he's not shooting as much from high danger areas right around the net. And like the one stretch he had where he had goals in back-to-back games, how did he score both of them? Right at the net, like, driving to the net to burying his own rebounds. Like, you see it, and you see him get rewarded when he does it, and that's not happening enough. So
and it's obvious to everybody, and Jake, like, that's where he's successful. And what annoys me about him is that, like, those are the hardest goals to get, and it's like he just refuses to do it. And it's that's where you make your bread and butter, but you refuse to do it because it's hard to do 82 games. And it's like, and that's what bothers me about him. It's like, I know, look, a lot of the analytics that you talk about, Scott, like, a lot of that can be not fluffed up, but a lot of that can happen because of structure and positioning. And, like, I do think he's a smart player. Like, he gets positioning, he gets X's and O's, he knows where to be. He's like, defensively, he's not a liability. And so a lot of those numbers will be in his favor. But like, when I watch him play, the two areas that jump out to me were if he did this consistently, you wouldn't even hear me talk about him not scoring, is what I said. Like when I watch him on the boards, he loses a lot of battles, and that comes down to effort. That's one man outworking another man. And then when his game is speed, like he's not using his speed to drive to the net and challenge defenders. If he does those things and isn't scoring, you won't hear a peep out of me. But those are just two things that jump off the page to me. And it's like, this kid is capable of both of those things, but he refuses to do it consistently. And if he did, I don't even think he would have these point slumps because he'd be doing the right things all the time. And I know players can have games off and here and there, but it seems like his games on are the anomaly. Like his best game one of his best games this year was in Detroit. He had a goal and an assist, and he also had 5 shots on goal, which was his season high for shots on goal in a game. Like no surprise there. He was engaged. So anyway, like I don't hate the player. I know he does a lot of things that don't hurt the team, but he just has so much. He has so much potential, and I just think a lot of it can be corrected by just being a little bit more hard nosed, and that's what it comes down to for me.
Was that our last down? I think it was.
Yeah, I think we made sure to save that for last because
we knew it was going to be a debate. And also, like, I literally can't escape the sun at this point. I know, like, if people are watching this, I'm like literally shrunken into like a corner of my screen because this is what's going on. So, I think we timed out.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel. I'm not gonna lie. I feel bad because, like, I don't dislike Jake DeBrusk. Like, if anybody listening is a big Jake DeBrusk fan, or hell, if Jake DeBrusk himself is listening, thanks for listening, Jake. Like, I honestly,
he always listens.
I honestly say this, like, I'm not trying to bag on your favorite player. Like, I honestly, it's because you don't hear me talking about Jacob Lauko not scoring or Oscar Steen. Like, I'm pretty consistent. Like, if I think somebody's capable of something and I see it's not because of a lack of skill that they're not doing what they need to do, I'm going to harp on it until I notice something change. And like I said, if I see him busting his ass and driving to the net and outworking guys on the boards and getting himself in the fight a little bit more, and he's not scoring, I won't say a thing. But until then, he might still be a down for me. Any final takeaways from you two?
No, I don't think so.
Nope.
Okay. So what do we have coming up here for the Bruins? On Saturday, they have
first Friday. They go back-to-back, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah, the Islanders and the Rangers, right?
Yeah. Oddly enough, with travel back to Boston, though. It's not just, 2 New York games, but.
And was there any clarity on Pavel Zacha's injury that he sustained, but what it was?
No, I still haven't seen anything, like anyone who's been able to pinpoint what exactly it was.
Okay. And then the timeline on McAvoy and Zacha are still TBD, right? They're not traveling.
They're still considered day to day. Bruins are off Thursday, so the earliest we get anything would be Friday's morning skate from whichever reporters are on Long Island for that game. Also, one other note: Saturday is another Errors night, and it's the lunch pail AC, which was the basically the post Bobby Orr group that made 2 Stanley Cup Finals in the late 70s, did not win, lost both to the Canadiens. Famous too many men on the ice game was that era. But I know like that those teams are, for people a little older than us, like a real fan favorite. Just the way that they played, some of the personalities on that team, like led by Terry O'Reilly, but stars like Brad Park and Rick Middleton. So that should be cool seeing a bunch of those guys.
What does that stand? What was that nickname? The Lunch Pill AC?
Yeah, so I think it was just based on like their hard work, like taking the lunch pail to work. I don't know if Don Cherry coined it or if someone like coined it for him, but yeah.
Okay. Looking forward to that. All right. Well, I assume the two of you are all set. So thank you all for listening and enjoy your weekend. We'll talk to you very soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.